2channel is a large anonymous message board in Japan, similar to Reddit or 4chan. It has had a significant impact on Japanese internet culture, creating memes and slang. This channel will mainly introduce occult content posted on 2channel.
If I write this, my old comrades will know who I am. If they find out, I'm in serious trouble. Once they learn I'm still alive, they'll come after me again. But if I don't write it, the existence of that well will remain hidden forever. That's why I've decided to write this. I'm not good at putting stories together, and it got quite long. Also, it's not a ghost story, so I hope only those who are genuinely interested will read it. This happened a few years ago. I was working under a junior executive in a certain organization in Tokyo, a man named Insan. These days, organizations like that outsource their daily shady business. But it's not the organization that hires people, it's individuals. If the police get involved, they'll just cut you loose. In return, though, the money was pretty good. I worked in a part of Tokyo where relatively wealthy Japanese and foreigners would come to have fun. It sounds like serious shady business, but what I was really doing wasn't all that intense. I would pick up flowers from a florist in a van, pay for them, and deliver them to various places, from cabarets to high-end clubs. You've seen flowers at cabarets, right? That's what it was. While delivering the flowers, I would also go around collecting payments. Of course, I'd get paid 3 to 5 times the amount I paid the florist. 30,000 yen would turn into 100,000 yen, and 50,000 yen into 250,000 yen. I was making around 30 million yen a month. At first, that was the extent of my shady jobs. Still, I took it seriously. The people I dealt with were often very sharp. Some thought I was just a young kid and tried to lowball me. But I couldn't resort to violence every time that happened, that would ruin business. Some guys would resort to that, but if the police got called, it would be game over. You wouldn't be able to collect any more money, and the organization wouldn't be happy. You'd be in deep trouble. So, in those cases, I would persistently talk it through. I'd negotiate, but I would never yield on the key points. I wouldn't let them haggle even a single yen, and I wouldn't accept any conditions. I've given a long introduction, but since I was doing a good job, N-San's underlings, like S-San and K-San, started to trust me more. After that, I started getting calls late at night to drive the same van I used for flower deliveries. The cargo was probably drums or cardboard boxes. When they loaded the cargo, I was instructed to stay in the driver's seat, and the rear of the van was sealed off so I couldn't see anything. All I had to do was follow a Benz, wait a little distance away when the cargo was dropped off, and then follow the Benz back to the starting point. I never knew what I was transporting. In return, I'd get paid the equivalent of a month's salary for flower deliveries in just one job. One night, I was called again. But this time, the crew was different. Normally, it would be S-San or K-San, along with one of their younger subordinates. But that night, N-San himself was there, along with just S-San and K-San. All three of them seemed unusually tense and irritated, like something wasn't right. When I arrived, they just told me, "Turn off the engine and wait," and mumbled something amongst themselves. Just let him go. He'll be fine. But more importantly, I could only catch bits of the conversation, but in the end, I was told to drive. I had a bad feeling about it. When the back hatch opened, I knew something had been loaded, but this time it wasn't drums or cardboard boxes. The sound it made was different, definitely heavy, but something was off. What was even more strange was that both S-San and K-San got in the van with me. Normally, I'd just follow the Benz by myself. And on top of that, we entered the expressway right away. There are cameras on the expressway, and the entrances have the in-system, a license plate recognition system. On jobs like this, we would always avoid the expressway and even regular roads with the N system. On the loop of the Tokyo Expressway, you know how there are spots where it dips underground because you're not supposed to look down on the Imperial Palace? Well, we were passing through one of those underground sections. Embarrassingly, while I'm confident in my driving skills, I'm terrible at remembering directions. I'm hopeless with directions, honestly. I think we circled the loop about twice. When traffic thinned out, the Benz that Ensan was driving suddenly turned on its hazard lights in the middle of a tunnel. Up until then, neither S-San nor K-San had said a word, but then S-San spoke. "Get into the right lane and stop." I did as instructed and pulled over. It was at a merge point. Then he said, "Back the van into that spot over there, like an island." I followed his directions and turned off the lights. There were pillars on both sides, and even if someone glanced back while driving past, I doubt they'd notice us. Even if they did, it'd be best for them not to get involved. Ensan's Benz drove off into the distance. S-San and K-San got out and started unloading the cargo. Then they told me to get out of the van too. This is when I had a really bad feeling. They'd never asked me to get out before. S-San and K-San were lifting a black plastic bag, just like the ones you see in movies, the kind used for body bags. And there was no doubt in my mind that what was inside was a human being. I realized at that moment that I was involved in something seriously dangerous, and my back started to hurt. I was probably on the verge of collapsing from fear. I kept wondering, why me? Why not someone from the organization? I didn't understand at the time, but later, I'd figure out why they chose me. S-San told me, "There's a key in my pocket. Use it to unlock the gate." I did as he instructed and opened the gate. We walked about 5 or 6 meters before coming across another door, or rather, an iron grill. It didn't have any handles, and there was no visible keyhole. I was puzzled about how to open it when S-San told me to get a different set of keys from another pocket. This time, there were 2 keys, one small and one large. There was a small stainless steel plate on the concrete wall, and I used the smaller key to open it. Inside was a cylindrical keyhole, and the larger key fit into it. When I turned it, I heard a metallic clunk, and the grill began to move slightly. It slid open from right to left, disappearing into the wall. It seemed like a system that couldn't be broken into by force. Beyond that point, it was pitch black. I turned on my maglite and led the way. After a short walk, we came across another iron door. This one had a sign that read, "Unauthorized entry prohibited, Defense Facilities Agency." I found it strange because this was supposed to be a road authority facility, right? I wondered if it was okay to be entering such a place. Still, since these people were so meticulous, I figured they knew what they were doing. But I couldn't shake my unease. What about surveillance cameras? As we proceeded deeper, we encountered something even stranger. We opened the iron door in the same way as before, and we stepped inside. S-San and K-San were both beginning to sweat, the load clearly heavy, but they didn't ask for my help in carrying it. As soon as we entered, there was a staircase leading down, and we descended, going down and down for quite a while. Occasionally, the two would stop to readjust the cargo they were carrying on their shoulders. At the bottom, we found ourselves in an incredibly wide corridor, stretching out to the left and right. It must have been about 10 meters wide. We took a break there. The corridor had dim lighting here and there, but we could manage without flashlights. We crossed to the other side. It was so wide it felt like crossing, and headed left. We kept walking, stopping to rest from time to time. I'm not sure how far we went. The corridor had no branches, just a straight path, with iron doors occasionally lined along the walls. At one door, S-San stopped and said, "Isn't this it? This must be it." The door had a sign that read, "Imperial Army Tunnel Number 13. The lettering was old. Can you believe that? In modern Japan, we have the Ground Self-Defense Force, not the Imperial Army. This must have been a tunnel from decades ago. Both S-San and K-San were drenched in sweat and breathing heavily, so we rested again after entering the room behind the door. Neither of them spoke, so I stayed silent too. After a while, S-San said, "Let's get this over with," and grabbed one side of the bag, where the feet likely were. Then, suddenly, the bag started thrashing. Caught off guard, S-San let go, and the other end of the bag opened, revealing the face of a gagged, slightly overweight man. I had definitely seen that man somewhere before. Even knowing that, I was frozen in shock. The fact that a living, breathing person had emerged from that bag terrified me. I heard S-San shout at K-San, "Why the hell is he awake? Give him the drugs. Knock him out. Get him back in the bag." K-San responded, "I don't have any drugs," or something to that effect. Meanwhile, the man in the bag kept struggling. It wasn't just random movement. His body was tied up, and he was desperately trying to wriggle free from the bag. Suddenly, S-San stomped down on the man's stomach through the bag. The movement stopped for a moment, but then the man let out a deep groan and started thrashing again. S-San didn't hesitate and kept stomping on his stomach over and over. Even after that, the man kept struggling. K-San joined in, and the two of them began beating the man mercilessly, kicking and stomping without holding back. I heard a few sharp cracks, probably his ribs breaking. The man's movements finally stopped. And then, for some reason, he turned his head and looked directly at me. He had been raging with a furious expression just moments ago, but now, he looked at me with a face full of despair, as if he were about to cry. S-San barked, "Put him back in the bag." K-San pressed the man's shoulder down with his foot and shoved him back into the bag. Even now, the memory of that moment plays in my mind in slow motion. The man's tearful eyes stayed locked on me until the very last moment he was forced back into the bag. It's an image I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Once K-San confirmed that the mouth of the bag was tightly tied, S-San gave it a few more kicks. "That should do it. Can't kill him, after all," S-San said, then looked at me. "Did you see his face?" And no. It all happened so suddenly, I couldn't really make out anything, I replied, doing my best to sound convincing. The truth was, I had this nagging feeling that I had seen the man somewhere before, but I couldn't quite place it. S-San and K-San lifted the now motionless bag again. This time, I was positioned between them, helping carry the load, probably because I now knew too much. I was bound to them in this horrible ordeal. We continued walking down the tunnel labeled Tunnel Number 13. Unlike the spacious corridors we had been walking through earlier, this one was narrow, barely 3 meters wide. The wall was constantly on our right, while on the left, there were occasional staircases that led down to doors. The stairs were about 1 meter wide, leading down just a few steps to the doors. I lost count of how many doors we passed before S-San suddenly said, "Stop." We stood in front of another door, this one labeled Imperial Army Well Number 126. Or was it 128? I remember it being an even number, but I'm not sure anymore. S-San told us to enter. Inside, the room was surprisingly spacious, about the size of a typical classroom in an elementary or middle school. In the center of the room, there was indeed a well. However, it was sealed with a heavy-looking iron lid. A chain was attached to the edge of the lid, which ran up to a pulley on the ceiling. There was another chain hanging from the pulley, and when pulled, it would lift the lid off the well. Following S-San's orders, I pulled on the chain, and the lid slowly started to open. I kept pulling the chain as instructed, gradually opening the heavy iron lid of the well. When it was fully open, S-San and K-San lifted the bag. I knew what was going to happen. Once they threw it into this deep, isolated well, it would never be found again. But one thing kept bothering me: why did they have to throw him in while he was still alive? They tossed the bag into the well. I expected to hear the splash of it hitting water, but instead, the sound was more of a dull splash, like there wasn't much water left in the well. It sounded like the well had dried up. S-San and K-San exchanged confused glances. S-San motioned toward me with his chin and gestured for me to shine my flashlight into the well. I pointed the light downward, but at first, it only faintly illuminated the bottom. Adjusting the focus of the beam, I finally managed to see clearly. The light revealed part of the bag at the bottom. It was true, the well had barely any water in it. Then, I saw a hand. A pale white hand. And then, a bald, white head emerged, too. Wait, the guy in the bag wasn't bald, right? I stood there, stunned, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then, another head appeared. 2 people? My mind was spinning. What the hell was going on? I kept staring as the second head slowly turned upward, revealing its face, or rather, the absence of one. It didn't have eyes, just small, hollow indentations like nostrils. It was something I couldn't comprehend, and we were all frozen in place. And it wasn't just 2 of them. There were other things moving around down there. What were they? Were they even human? Why were they in the well? What were they doing? At that moment, the door suddenly swung open, startling all of us. I dropped the flashlight and stood up. S-San and K-San did the same. The person who entered was N-San. He looked at us with suspicion. Are you done here? S-San, still a bit dazed, replied after a short pause. Yes, it's done. N-San glanced at our expressions and quickly understood that we had seen what was inside the well. You looked inside, didn't you? None of us nodded or spoke, but our silence confirmed it. Close the lid. Now, N-San commanded. I rushed to the chain and started cranking it in the opposite direction, slowly lowering the lid back into place. Don't think too much about it. Forget it, N-San said firmly. I tried to follow his order, but my mind kept racing. S-San had said earlier, we can't kill him. But why? I doubt even S-San knew why it was so important not to kill the man. Why did they throw him in alive? Alive, into a well with those strange, inhuman creatures down there. I didn't want to think about it anymore. We retraced our steps back to the car. This time, S-San and K-San got into N-San's Benz. That was the last time I ever saw the 3 of them. I remembered who the man in the bag was. He was the 3rd son of the organization's boss, recently released from prison. He had a reputation for being incompetent, a screw-up who got caught doing petty jobs and ended up behind bars. I'd only seen him 2 or 3 times, but I remembered him as an arrogant guy, always acting cocky for no reason. But no matter how much of a loser he was, killing the boss's son was a major violation. No matter how well they hid the body, it would eventually come out. They must have used me to transport him in hopes of keeping it under wraps for as long as possible. About 2 weeks after that night, N-San disappeared. Then, I got a call from S-San telling me, you'd better disappear too. It had been discovered that they had killed the boss's son. I had kept my distance from the organization, which was my saving grace. That allowed me to escape. I have no idea what happened to S-San or K-San. It's been a few years now, and I've been moving from one crowded place to another, always staying on the run. I'm writing this from an internet cafe. Soon, even cafes like these will require ID to log in. This might be my last chance to share this story. Once the organization finds out about this post, they'll quickly trace where it came from. That's why I'll never return to this city again. I want someone to find that well. Why do people from an organized crime syndicate have access to a key to a place like that? If someone uncovers the truth, maybe the people hunting me will all be caught. I just want to escape. I plan to keep running for the rest of my life.